$400 billion in debt that doesn't show up anywhere, not on your credit report, not on any government ledger. It's just invisible right now. If you've ever tapped Pay in 4 at checkout for a hoodie, a flight, even groceries, you're already part of this story. And there's a real chance you don't actually know how much you owe right now across every app doing this at once. The New York Federal Reserve found something they didn't expect. These platforms have created roughly $400 billion in household obligations that mostly escape traditional credit reporting. Not hidden by accident, hidden by design. We spent weeks in Federal Reserve and CFPB data. Here's what we found: how this debt hides, why the delinquency numbers you've heard are technically true and completely misleading, what happens the day a company called FICO finally turns the lights on, and why the one government agency that was supposed to be watching just walked away. Let's start with how the hiding actually works. Before 2020, almost nobody in America had heard of Buy Now, Pay Later. Now it's a checkout button on Amazon, Walmart, Sephora, DoorDash, nearly every major retailer, and the growth has been staggering. Transaction volume has grown roughly 20% a year since 2021. By 2025, Americans ran about $70 billion through these apps. Here's the part almost nobody explains clearly. When you take out a BNPL loan, you're not just borrowing from one company. You can open a Klarna loan, an Afterpay loan, and an Affirm loan, all in the same afternoon. And none of them can see the others. But you might be thinking, so what? It's 4 small payments. How much damage can that really do? Therefore, let's look at what happens when that small debt gets stacked, because the honest numbers are worse than the marketing and better than the panic headlines, both at once. Here's a number the BNPL industry likes to repeat. The default rate, loans that are written off as a total loss, sits under 2%. That sounds almost harmless, but that's not the number that matters to your actual life. Because when the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau surveyed real users, 47% said they'd made at least one late payment in the past year, up from 41% in 2025, up from 34% in 2024. Both numbers are technically true: a 2% default rate, a 47% late payment rate. They're just measuring two completely different things, and almost no one puts them side by side for you. But even a late payment doesn't destroy your credit if nobody's watching. Therefore, the entire story hinges on one question: who is actually watching? And for years, the honest answer was almost no one. In 2025, FICO, the company behind the credit score that decides whether you get a mortgage, a car loan, an apartment, announced something big. 2 new scoring models: FICO Score 10B-NPL and 10TB-NPL. For the first time, these scores would actually count your buy now pay later loans. Here's why that matters. If you've been using these apps responsibly, on time, every time, this could actually help your score, especially if you're young and don't have much credit history yet. But if you've been quietly stacking loans across 4 different apps, missing a payment here and there, none of that has been visible. Until this switch flips, it still isn't. Therefore, here's the twist. Almost no financial channel is reporting clearly. These new scores were announced in June 2025, expected in market that fall. It is now over a year later. They are still not in market. Meanwhile, the three biggest providers don't even report the same way. Affirm sends almost everything to the bureaus. Klarna reports only part of it. Afterpay reports almost none. So the debt exists. The score that would reveal it doesn't yet. You are living in the gap between those two facts right now, whether you use these apps or not. Because this gap is reshaping how lenders see an entire generation of borrowers. In May 2024, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau did something significant. It issued a rule treating buy now, pay later loans like credit cards for consumer protection purposes. Real disclosures, real dispute rights, real oversight. Then, in May 2025, months into the new administration, the CFPB reversed course. It announced it would not enforce that rule. Then it said it didn't intend to reissue it at all, calling its own earlier rule procedurally defective. And here's the part that should genuinely concern you. The CFPB's own research contradicts itself. One internal study published in January found users were piling on debt. A second study from the same agency, published just months later in June, after the rule was already gone, found few negative impacts at all. But you might assume some other agency stepped in to fill the gap. Therefore, here's the honest answer. Without federal rules, oversight now falls to individual states, and their approach is, in the CFPB's own former staff's words, anything but uniform. Some states have rules, most don't, so the debt is real. The scoring model that would reveal it is stalled, and the one agency built to watch all of it just walked away, right as adoption keeps climbing. To be fair, this isn't a story with a single villain. BNPL genuinely helps some people avoid high-interest credit cards, especially for one-time, planned purchases. Klarna, Affirm, and Afterpay have built real, useful products for millions of responsible users. But the business model depends on volume, on as many people as possible clicking Pay in 4 as often as possible, across as many apps as possible, with as little friction as possible. Every loan is a small win for them, whether or not it's a win for you. The cost isn't distributed equally. The 22-year-old stacking 4 loans to make rent this month is taking on real risk. The platforms processing that loan are recording real revenue. That's not an opinion. That's just how the incentives are built. To be fair, this isn't a story with a single villain. BNPL genuinely helps some people avoid high-interest credit cards, especially for one-time, planned purchases. Klarna, Affirm, and Afterpay have built real useful products for millions of responsible users. But the business model depends on volume, on as many people as possible, clicking Pay in 4 as often as possible, across as many apps as possible, with as little friction as possible. Every loan is a small win for them, whether or not it's a win for you. The cost isn't distributed equally. The 22-year-old stacking 4 loans to make rent this month is taking on real risk. The platforms processing that loan are recording real revenue. That's not an opinion. That's just how the incentives are built. The debt is already there. It's just invisible right now. Somewhere between your phone and a checkout button, you agreed to something you never really read. And one day, maybe next year, maybe sooner, a company called FICO is going to flip a switch. And every 4 easy payments you ever made shows up on paper, all at once. Most people find out the hard way when a loan officer says no. But you'll already know why. If this helped you understand something the news hasn't explained plainly, share it with one person who needs to hear it. We post every week. Subscribe if you want to know what's coming next.